Dear Anthony, today we're going to talk about songwriting. There's a lot of ways to approach songwriting, and over the last 30 years I've had an opportunity to meet many great writers, many of them my idols growing up, and I've learned a ton of stuff. It's an art and a craft. I think that some songwriters are born to be brilliant, but that doesn't mean you can't get better and learn your craft more and define what you want to say and create your own unique imprint on songs. Okay? So I'm going to go over some things I've written down and then just talk you through a few other things. First thing I want to talk about is that you need to go out and live. You need to go out into the world and experience things. The world beyond your home is wild and woolly and waiting to be despoiled. So get out and have some adventures, make your mistakes, and write them down. That's the key. If you have any ideas that pop in your head at any time, doesn't matter where you are, always bring a notepad with you and write things down. Number 2 is read a lot. You'll get way more out of reading than you would suspect. I mean, you should be reading anyway. Everybody should be reading. We shouldn't be a society built around not reading, but I won't get political here. But seriously, the meter of books and prose and the structure is very important, and the flow of it. I think, the best writers read a lot, so it doesn't matter, other than comic books. Get yourself some serious literature, catch up on things maybe you should have read in school. That's what I did. Find your favorite authors, stick with them, that's cool. Just read a lot, it'll help. Songs are conversation. Listen to conversations and write them down. For instance, you know the famous song Tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson? Classic example. People say I'm the life of the party because I tell a joke or two. Though I might be laughing loud and hearty, deep inside I'm blue. So take a good look at my face. I know my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace the tracks of my tears. It's genius. Absolute genius. Smokey is one of the best. It's a conversation. A lot of songs are conversations. I have one here. It's one of my favorites. It's one you'll know. It's called Best of My Love by the Eagles. Listen to this. Every night I'm lying in bed, holding you close in my dreams, thinking about all the things that we said and coming apart at the seams. We try to talk it over, but the words come out too rough. I know you were trying to give me the best of your love. And let me stick with this for a second, because my dear friend J.D. Souther, who co-wrote the song, I know for a fact he wrote the bridge. So within this conversation and the greatest conversational songs, you look at the song that I wrote for Betty LaVette, like, maybe we ought to think this through, maybe we ought to tell the truth, because it's the point of no return and I don't belong to you, but I guess we shouldn't talk about that now. You dig? But in this song, let's look at the bridge, because the bridge strays from this a little bit, but is no less brilliant, especially the way they come back out of it. It's unbelievable. I'm going back in time, and it's a sweet dream. It was a quiet night, and I would be all right if I could go on sleeping. But every morning I wake up and worry what's going to happen today. They go right back to the conversation, and you go from sleep, dreaming, to every morning, right back. It's pretty brilliant stuff. So, conversations. Number 4 is edit, edit, edit. Then edit again. Seriously, it's great to write in a rush of creativity, but you got to edit your stuff. And you got to edit and edit and edit. And then when you think you're done, keep editing. Because keep it tight, keep it taut, keep it compact. It'll be much better. Number 5 is have an arc. Go somewhere. Take people on a journey and don't waste people's time. It's not war and peace. These are simple, everyday emotions. And that's the other thing that's, I think, maybe the most important thing about songs. They're emotions. You're trying to make people feel something. So have an arc, go somewhere with it, take them on a journey, and keep it tight and conversational and not puffy. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't get too highfalutin, keep it simple. Next, don't write someone else's songs. It's already been done. Find your own unique perspective and your voice. I know it's down there somewhere, it's in there, every writer. Find your voice and hone in on that and find your own unique perspective. Don't be afraid to say something you're afraid of. If it resonates with you, it will resonate with others. Read their mail. You should be talking to them like you're reading their mail, or they should feel like you're reading their mail. This one I'm going to read from because this is advice that a friend of mine gave me, a really, really great, brilliant songwriter years ago, and I've written it down and I carry this with me in my wallet everywhere I go. Not that I need to be reminded anymore, but it's just like in the back of my psyche always. Almost every classic song, almost every classic rememberable song has these factors in it. Recognition. The listener sees something right away in the song in themselves. They see themselves in the first verse, in the first opening lines of your song. They recognize something, and that's how you grab them in. Revelation. You reveal something to them they probably already knew, but from a new perspective that grabs them and leads them on. So twist it somehow, saying things in an unusual or just a new way, a new angle that takes them to the next step in the song. You're having a conversation with them and you're taking them forward. Transcendence. You take them someplace they didn't expect or weren't able to imagine themselves. A lot of times that happens in a bridge, like in Best of My Love, where it kind of slightly diverges from the conversation and gets a little more imagaic, but then goes back to the tag where it just wraps the whole story up. And that takes us to liberation. You, they, the listener, are free. The song and the sentiment have been lifted, unshackled, and thus so has the listener. Right? Like every great song has that period on it, right? And this is about that arc I was talking about. You know, every movie and novels, for that matter, have an arc. You know, the first act, second act, third act. Well, the last act of your song is liberation. You have to take somebody somewhere and make them feel like, man, right, that's me, and now I'm free because someone else has, spoken the words that I couldn't. So recognition, revelation, transcendence, and liberation. Every great classic song has that. Number 8. A killer first line or a killer first few lines. Something different and unusual or saying it in a new way. And this all connects to what I've been saying previously. You know, you have to grab them, you have to take them in, and you have to get them. I mean, at least in modern music, man, if you don't get them in the next 10 seconds, you're gone, right? So that's very, very, very important to say it in a different, unique, and unusual way to get them in, and then, but while still having a conversation. It's very, very important. It's very cool. When you hear it, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's really neat, you know? Well, there you go. That's what you got to do. Now, I want to talk also a little bit here, just free form, about songwriters. So there's many different ways to go about this. I think that, you know, as the same friend that gave me the recognition, you know, transcendence, liberty, all those, he told me, you know, there was a time back in my early career where I was talking about some singer-songwriter that I was fond of, and he was like, yeah, he's pretty good. But what about the Beatles? Why don't you you know, the Beatles are good, right? You know, why don't you the Beatles are the best. So if the Beatles are the best, why don't you shoot for that and not some, you know, flavor of the moment singer-songwriter? Made a lot of sense. That resonated with me. Like, the Beatles are the best. Motown are the best. I would consider the Beatles and Motown my top two. The songwriters in the Beatles and at Motown were so unbelievable. Those songs are going to last the test of time. More so, and I don't want to disparage anybody, but I hear a lot of stuff today like, come on, really? They're not going to be singing this stuff 100 years from now. But you know what? They'll be singing the Beatles and they'll be singing Motown, as well as a few others, okay? So, and the Beatles were so great that supposedly the third best writer in that band wrote the second most recorded song in history. Think about that, all right? George Harrison wrote something. All right, the Beatles. Motown, every writer, producer, singer at Motown were amazing. Those songs are incredible. Like I mentioned, Smokey Robinson, Holland Does Your Holland. They're all amazing. They're just the best you can find. So I would suggest shooting for that. Right? Like, even if you fall short, which we're all going to fall short of the Beatles and Motown, but at least you're shooting for that and you're trying for that level and that excellence. And if you fall a little short, well, guess what? You're doing pretty damn good and a lot better than what I've been hearing from most people. So that would be another recommendation just off the top of my head. Another one is this. You know, Anthony, you're pretty young, so maybe this doesn't influence you as much, but there's a lot of today's music that was influenced by 70s singer-songwriter stuff. And then before that, you had great writers, great producers, and great singers, and they were all brought together, and that's what made hit songs. Nowadays, it seems to me that it's very artist driven, and that came out of the 70s singer-songwriter movement, in my opinion. And the problem with that is it's not that those singer-songwriters weren't brilliant. They were. But first of all, a lot of it was imagic and personal. And while people related to that then, I don't know that that has the same connection that, say, the Beatles and Motown did for some people. But in general, I think that that sort of, you know, like you can write poetry to music. You can. It's very difficult. Leonard Cohen could do it. Bob Dylan could do it, at least early in his career. But those were very, very rare exceptions. And, you know, Leonard Cohen was pretty direct about the way that he created his lyrics. I suggest you study his stuff. I also suggest you study Dylan. Bob Dylan is a very unique character. I think characters like Dylan and Paul Simon, they're born and then they hone their craft. Like they're born brilliant and hone their craft. The rest of us have to be highly musical and willing to write songs and just get better at it. So there's a delineation there, there's a distinction, but I think the problem that came out of the singer-songwriter movement, which came out of Dylan, was that they were made into heroes, right? Like the whole mythology of Rolling Stone and, you know, making, I guess that's how they sold magazines, that's how they sold albums, because it used to be singles based. And I just think that nowadays it's very artist driven. You've got artists writing songs that they shouldn't be writing because they're just not great. You want to have more hit records? Hook up with better writers. There are brilliant writers up there. You like out there. You know, here in Nashville, a lot, and I respect this immensely, so I don't want this to sound disparaging in any way because I wish I could do what these people do. But there were people who came to town wanting to be artists, who were maybe pretty good singers, decent guitar players or piano players, whatever instrument they played. They wrote some songs. I don't know, maybe they weren't good looking enough or they weren't dynamic enough. I don't know what it was, but it didn't happen. So what they did was they figured it out. They figured out a formula to connect with people by having conversations, by writing short, taut, tight, compact songs that resonated with people. And they figured it out. They figured out that formula, and a lot of them have made a really good living writing songs and not being artists. Because I'm still a firm believer that great singers, great songwriters, and great producers make hit records. So I wouldn't get too wrapped up in being imagaic and thinking like, this brings me back to the Beatles and Motown. And just don't get too wrapped up in certain artists. Stick with the classics. You know, I mean, Hoagie Carmichael and the Gershwins and Cole Porter. Those are amazing songwriters. Like, find those songs. They're incredible. And the Beatles learned from them and Motown learned from them. And guess what? Their songs are going to last forever. So, very important. Another important thing, maybe this will be the last thing I'll share with you today, and if you have any more questions, just ask me later, because I'm sure I'm forgetting tons of stuff, is that every great song, the downbeats fall on vowels. Think about it, right? Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis. Wise men say, right? All the Way by Frank Sinatra. When somebody loves you, it's no good unless. All of the vowels are on the downbeats. I mean, Beach Boys songs, Beatles songs, Motown, I don't care. All the greats, the vowels land on the downbeats. In fact, Frank Sinatra used to mark his sheet music and the lyrics with arrows, so he knew where all the downbeats are, so he could swing them. And that's part of what makes the song great, is swinging around the vowels. You don't want to be hitting consonants on that. And then one more thing, I just thought of one more thing. There's this great video on the web. Some guy broke down Max Martin's hits. Now, look, you may say, hey, do you like Max? Yes, I like Max Martin. The guy's freaking amazing. And he gets it, right? It turns out that, you know, there is a very specific, first of all, he writes everything at like a 4th grade level, but that's intentional. And then he keeps everything simple. There's short intros to the song. You get to the chorus right away. I mean, it's like, you gotta find this video. Maybe if I find it, I'll link it on the bottom in the info for this video for you, because I was like flabbergasted because it was brilliant. And guess what? Max Martin is brilliant. That's a modern day guy who within the modern context has figured out how to make that work without it being terrible. Like, seriously, those songs are great. I'm sorry, they're just great. The same thing with those Shania Twain songs. They were kind of written like Max Martin songs. Like Robbie Fulks, I think it was, wrote a blog about it. Like that 4 seconds into each song, there's a vocalization like a "Come On Girls" or a "Hey" or whatever, and then 10 seconds in, you were into the first verse, and then another 15 seconds later, it was just brilliant. Breakdown of what those songs, because those songs were hits for a reason. Like Mutt Lange knows what he's doing. So anyway, these are some of the things you need to look into and search out. There's some really great books on songwriting that I read coming up. I did get to take some classes with some really great writers when I was first starting out. There was a country writer who had like 7 #1 hits, who actually lived in New York when I lived there. So he was teaching at the new school, and I took that class. That was actually pretty informative. He had a very interesting way of doing it where he wrote the chorus first. That seemed kind of weird to me, but guess what? It works. So whatever works, that's why you read books. That's why you check out. I mean, with YouTube, it's amazing what you can find out these days. So, there's I think there's a book called Songwriters on Songwriting that I read. I must have read like 20 books on the subject. And again, now with YouTube, I mean, come on, if you gotta, it's easy. So just get out there and do it and kick ass. And if you have any questions, let me know. If anybody else has any questions, put them in the scroll below. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Oh, and we will be talking about working in the studio. We're going to be talking about gear. We're going to be talking about all facets of gear, from, how to not spend a lot of money, how not to get caught up in it, and how to do it wisely and compactly. We're going to be talking about the road. I got a whole bunch of stuff to talk to you about. So anyway, keep working hard, Anthony, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.